Good morning. Thursday morning, April 1st, April Fool's Day. Well, I will be happy to say that, as Paul said, I will be a fool for Christ. Paul is continuing his teaching in chapter 14 on the gift of tongues. We talked about that last week, the benefits of tongues, that tongues speaks to God, that edifies self, it edifies ourself, and it also edifies others if it is interpreted. And Paul wants to make it clear that in a public setting, that tongues need to be interpreted so that others would be able to be edified as well. Now, we're going to pick up in verse 6. But now, brethren, if I come to you speaking with tongues, what shall I profit you unless I speak to you either by revelation, by knowledge, by prophesying, or by teaching? Paul wants them to understand that if there is a tongue, then there needs to be an interpretation, whether it's revelation or knowledge or prophesying or teaching. That tongue needs to be interpreted so that people understand what is being said. Other than that, tongues edifies your own spirit as the Spirit of God builds you up. And then in verses 7 through 11, Paul uses the illustration of a flute, a harp, a trumpet, the distraction of sound if it's not played correctly. He used that same illustration in chapter 13, verse 1, when he said that if there's no love, it's like a clanging brass or cymbal. Paul talks about how it is important that things be in harmony. Other portions of Scripture, he talked about that things need to be done in order. He talks about words that can't be understood becoming confusing. We all have been in that situation where we've heard someone speak in Spanish or someone speak in Japanese or speak in a language that you don't understand, and you look around for someone to tell you what they said. You ask, what did someone who knows what that language is or can interpret that language, translate that language, you ask them, what did he, what did she just say? Paul continues to instruct the Corinthian church with this valuable gift. In verse 13, he says, therefore let him who speaks in tongue pray that he may interpret. That when a gift of tongues is given in a public situation, the individual that is speaking that tongue is responsible to interpret that, or he should be quiet and not give that tongue. Verse 14, Paul says, if I pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my understanding is unfruitful. When I begin to pray in tongues, I am speaking, my spirit is speaking directly to the Spirit of God. I may not know exactly what is being said to the Lord unless the Lord would give me that insight to what my tongue would be interpreted to. But it's important that when we are in a public situation that tongue be interpreted. Verse 15 then tells us what the conclusion is. What is the conclusion then? Paul says, I pray with the Spirit, but I also pray with understanding. I'll sing in the Spirit. I will also sing with the understanding. Paul wants people to know that both are perfectly legitimate in our spiritual walk with the Lord. In a nutshell, tongues are very important. And when it comes to the unbeliever, verses 20 through 25 Paul gives us the teaching that as an unbeliever hears a tongue, he would be attracted to that. He would wonder, what is that? What is being spoken then? And when that tongue is then interpreted, the unbeliever, as someone who would be speaking Spanish, and then someone would tell them what that message was in Spanish, they would understand. So when someone speaks in a spiritual language, a tongue in a public service, and then it is interpreted, it would grab the unbeliever's attention. And if it's done in love, and if it's explained, and if it's shared in such a manner, the unbeliever as well can be led to Jesus and can be lifted up. It's when it's not done properly, when it's done without taste or overbearing, that the unbeliever would have problems with that. And of course, it isn't natural. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but neither does Spanish or German or Latin or any other language when there isn't an interpretation. So in a public setting, when a tongue is given and an interpretation, then the believer is edified, and the unbeliever then is can be drawn to that. Therefore, tongues are for a sign, not to those who believe, but to the unbeliever. But prophesying is not for unbelievers, but those who believe. Therefore, if the whole church comes together in one place and all speak with tongues, there would come those who would be uninformed or unbelievers. Will not they not say to you that you're out of your mind? But if all prophesy, an unbeliever or uninformed person comes in, for he is convinced by all. He is convinced by all. Thus the secrets of his heart are revealed. And so, falling down on his face, he will worship God and report that God is truly among us. Paul, in the first part of this portion of chapter 14, for the first 25 verses, wants to make clear that the gift of tongues is important, is valuable, and is essential for the Christian walk today. I hope if you had any questions about tongues, that 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and our explanation of that today will help you with that. If it didn't and you still have questions, please feel free to give me a call. I would appreciate talking to you. God bless you. Remember, tomorrow evening is our Good Friday service at the church, and we look forward. That's at 7 o'clock. And then, of course, the Easter celebration of the community sunrise service at 7:30, and then our Easter breakfast there in the fellowship hall, and then, of course, our celebration of Easter. God bless you. Have a wonderful, blessed Easter weekend.